Start. And recording is on. So welcome to this first meeting from the Decoupled Menu Initiative. We are going to be doing this now for a couple of weeks in a row and hear from the community and those who are working on creating decoupled menus and everything related to that. We want to hear from all of you. So today we have Stuart, who is, who we are very thankful that is still awake, or he woke up really early.
Yes, I woke up an hour ago.
So we're gonna start with Stuart, and he's gonna go through a couple of things and show us something that he has been working on, and then we would have a little bit of Q&A after that. But we will make sure that this is only until the half an hour stop, and then Wesley would take over and talk about Webpack and what he's been doing with that. So I think we can just start this off, and I will interrupt if there's any questions that I will help you. But we also encourage everybody here just to use the chat or ask a question if you have any. We want to have this interactive. So Stuart, thank you and good luck. Have fun.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? Has that come through? It is coming through now, I think.
Yes.
Yep. Wonderful. All right. So just before I start, everything here is available on GitHub. So github.com/decipher/drux-menu-initiative, including the slides. You can follow along at a code sandbox. I would chuck them into the chat, but that'll probably just make me jump around windows. So I'll jump into a little bit of a quick presentation. Most of this is examples and some demonstrations, and I'm more than happy for people to jump in and ask questions during. But a little bit about me. I am Stuart Clark. I am a senior decoupled developer at Reality Loop, the project lead at DruxtJS. I am Deciphered on Drupal.org, and I am a parent in Victoria, Australia. Most of what I will be talking about in the community would be related to DruxtJS, which is a project I've been working on for a few years and ruminating over for many years before that. It is a decoupled Drupal flavored JavaScript framework. At this stage, it is tailored towards the Nuxt.js, which is a Vue.js framework. But as you'll see as I go through some of the examples, it's not necessarily restricted to Vue. It's just what I primarily focus on at this point in time. It is a modular framework, so there's a bunch of modules already available for things like blocks, breadcrumbs, entity, menu, etc. And there is a demo available at demo.druxtjs.org, which is a demonstration of the Drux site module rendering the Drupal umami demo as best possible based on the available data. Okay, so I don't know if I have enough time to do a live demo. I would love to and can definitely do so and may do so still. But for those interested to get the Drupal side of things set up, these are the steps here, and it's relatively straightforward. Druxt, as far as Drupal is involved, only needs the Druxt module to be installed. One of the things when I first started discussing this that came up relatively regularly is Contenta, and seeing Druxt as a alternative or a competitor to Contenta. Druxt is a module that can simply fit into any existing Drupal site, including Contenta. The first instance of Druxt was written on a Contenta backend, and that is a client instance that is still actively developed. So Contenta usage will continue to be available for some time, or for the foreseeable future. So it's simply install Drupal, install the Druxt module. In this case, I'm using Quick Start to use the internal PHP server to get that all up and running. Install the Drupal, the DruxtJS module, and then enable this permission to, in the case of my demos, an anonymous user. In the case of a production website, you could apply this permission to any role. And then you'll have to deal with some sort of authentication, but it will simply enable some additional JSON API resources as GET request only to provide Drux to do a few additional things. The future for the Drux project is that there would be no Drupal module whatsoever. Everything would be baked into core, but until some improvements and modifications are made, that's not yet possible. I'll be talking about the Druxt menu module today primarily, and before I do that, I suppose I should explain exactly what the module provides. So you can find a bit of information about the module at menu.druxtjs.org and the code base at GitHub. So each Druxt module provides multiple different things. In the case of the Druxt menu module, it comes with a utility class, the Druxt menu class. It comes with two Vue.js components, Druxt menu and Druxt menu item. It comes with a Vue mixin, a Vuex module, and a Nuxt module. So a typical installation of this module into a Nuxt application would be simply to install the Nuxt module, and that in turn will install all of the other relevant components it needs into the application, and then you just invoke the Druxt menu component where you need to. But for instance, if you were building a React component, you can use the Druxt menu utility class, and that allows you to communicate with Drupal to get the JSON API resources for the relevant menu that you want to render. Or this Vue mixin, which is used for some of the customization. I'll go through a little bit of that now. So this is the Druxt menu component, and it's literally just Druxt menu. And the way it works is when you use this component in your Nuxt website, and this is a Nuxt component more than a Vue.js component because it takes advantage of some of Nuxt's infrastructure. It will execute a asynchronous fetch hook provided by Nuxt, which will then fire off the Vuex action to get the relevant data, which in turn hits the utility class's getMenu method, which communicates with the JSON API backend, and then all of the data returned is added to the Vuex store via the add entities. And then the component can interact with that data and render it as required. And it has a variety of properties such as depth, so you can adjust on the display of this data, only show me the depth of 1 or whatever you need be, adjust the component that's being rendered, etc. And this here is a live example of that particular code. So home, articles, and recipes is the data that would be returned or is actively being returned for that. So if I were to swap that to admin instead of menu, you'll then see, whoops, I'm getting my marquee effect properly now, but you can see this inaccessible item because the admin menu is returning one inaccessible item. So if I jump through to an example of actually using this menu component in a real world example and how to theme it. So one thing that I haven't included in these slides, but Druxt, the framework and the modules, they have a slot-based system built into them. So all of the components, all of the Druxt components support this slot system provided by the main Druxt module. And it can be a little bit easier to actually demonstrate that live. So once I blow through these, I'll jump into some code and show some of that, time permitting. But if you were to render a Druxt menu component in your Nuxt page, and that menu was the main menu, then the Druxt component system will, if it can find a matching component registered of Druxt menu and then the name of that particular menu, it will wrap this component with that and then output the Druxt menu via this slot. So in what that actually means is that when we render out our Druxt menu, we're getting here a bnav with bnav items. So if I open up the developer tools, we can have a quick look at that. So this is our menu here. Druxt menu there is being rendered, and that component system is here. So I don't know how visible this is, but you can see, and under the data we have components is, so it's currently resolving Druxt menu main. Of the available options, its only available option there is Druxt menu main, and it's providing this props data through to that particular component. So if we jump into here into the Druxt menu main wrapper, we can see that it has access to all of the items that need to be rendered, but all it's doing in this example is rendering out a slot. So it's rendering out these items here. So 3 bnav items for the data. So I'll close that and jump through to the next example. This here is the templates option for customizing Druxt menu. The Druxt menu component, it may be easier if I actually show this here.
I can't search on your TV, but you can browse on this device. Here are TV shows: Matching Express,
oh my God.
Nigella Express, David Suchet on the Orient Express, Jonathan Bang's Gourmet Express,
Kill me.
Express Yourself, Billy Blank's Tabo Express,
Oh my God.
and Stott Pilates Express Workout.
Go away, Siri, seriously.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
No, I don't want to. Go away, Siri.
I don't have an answer for that. Is there something else I can help with?
I honestly don't know how to make it go away. I think if I don't talk. All right. Okay, I think we're good. All right, Druxt menu component. So if you take a look at this here, you can see down, deep down in here, we have, oh, no, I'm not going to find it. I shouldn't have gone off script. I'm just going to stay here. All right, so there are 2 slots provided by the Druxt menu module. And if you pass in the templates here, you can customize each of those slots. So by default, if you use this method, Druxt menu, and then pass in template and the item, as well as, the parent template, you get the ability to control the exact markup that gets rendered for each of those items. So when Drux menu is called, it will iterate over all of the items it's got and determine whether the item it's rendering currently is an item. If it is, it'll render it through this template, or if it's a parent, it'll render it through this template, as in it has children. So if it has children, it will render it as a B nav item dropdown, and inside of that, it will render itself. It'll pass itself through as a Drux menu item, which will render just simply an item, as well as iterating over all of its children and rendering each of them via this template up here. So that allows for bootstrap style menu, which the parent item is not clickable. It will just provide that as a duplicated item below it. Unfortunately, I can't show you an example of this one here without jumping into code for multiple reasons. One, the test data I have has only got a single layer of data, and yeah, another reason which I won't really get into. So this is a more advanced approach of the slot system customization method. So this is a slotless wrapper. So in this case, we simply just invoke the Drux menu component like this, and our template here, and I'm actually going to copy this and paste it in a second. This is our slotless component wrapper. So it's not rendering out a slot at all. It's simply taking the data made available to it via the Drux menu mix-in here to load in all of the items and then iterate over each of those items itself. So this allows for, instead of relying on the Drux menu template system and the defaults that it determines, it allows simply the data to be provided from the Vuex store and then used however you want to render. Again, the same looking menu, but this time you've got full control over how you deal with that. So if I just jump into an editor, 1 second, I will just grab that code and put it in play. Oops. Okay, so if I go over here, oops, I already had it in play. Go figure, that's fine. So never mind, I will keep moving forwards. That is currently rendering. Okay, so this example here is the first one that doesn't actually use the Drux menu component itself. So this is a case where you would use what's made available via the Drux menu module. In this case, we're extending the Drux menu component. So we're making our own component, menu1.view. It extends the component provided by the Drux menu module, and that's it. So what that means is it gets all of the methods, the props, etc., that provides, but none of the template. So we can override the template entirely ourselves here. So in this case, I'm just rendering the get menu items method provided by that, and that just simply dumps out the raw JSON required. And a further example of how you can create your own custom components, this one using a Nuxt plugin, the Nuxt plugin for Drux menu, which is just here, this Drux menu. So any component in your Nuxt site would have access to that plugin, and it can call the methods made available for the menu utility class. So if you have a look here in the API at that, which is here, you can see. So the plugin will just instantiate the Drux menu class with the configuration you've made available. And then you've got these 3 methods you can call. Get, which will get the menu based on the method configured in your site, which isn't necessarily relevant at the moment. But the two methods that it makes available is the default one, which uses get menu link content, which will get menu items from the out of the box JSON API server, or get JSON API menu items, which uses the JSON API menu items module, which makes available additional items that aren't provided by default with Drupal. So in this case here, this demo is just fetching both of those methods and assigning that data and then rendering it out just so we can see a difference. So with this current live connection to my backend, you can see that it gets nothing when it invokes the menu link content, but when it invokes the JSON API menu items, it gets these 3 items. And lastly, this is just an example of how you could use this without Vue.js at all. So we're just loading in the utility class directly. So this is just native Node.js. The only dependency in this particular project is Druxt Menu. So we're just requiring that class, instantiating it with some settings, and then executing that method and then logging out all the data. So you can see that one at this sandbox here. And just take a second. And you can see the results over here. So we've just got the available data. So while I haven't tried to create a React component, I figure it should be a relatively simple process, adapt the methods that are used. In the case of the Vue.js components, I'm leveraging Nuxt and its plugin and its Vuex store and that sort of thing, but you could do the same thing with React. So I'd welcome anyone jumping into that at some stage or opening a discussion around that. That's pretty much all of the slides that I put together. I can jump into some code and stuff. It might be better to do that with the floor open to questions and such, but yeah.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank
you. I think we should just dive into questions. So anyone have a question for Stuart or wants to hear something or?
One question I have is I noticed in some of your code you had some string manipulation, menu items, in particular replacing internal with an empty string. Is that something that you're running into a lot? Is that to do with the JSON API data?
That is, yeah. Okay. So it's probably the one thing that pops up the most. It's a bit of an annoyance, but yeah, the data currently, if it's an internal link, starts with internal : and there are reasons for that. There is an open issue around that as well. I believe, I don't have the details off the top of my head. I do compensate for that in the Druxt menu module itself, but in the cases of overriding the defaults and customizing it with, full control, like this one here, you then have to work with the raw data again. So you've got to go ahead and do it yourself. There's actually a bug in Druxt menu at the moment to do with external links as well as the internal links thing. So there's little bits and pieces that need to be fixed on both sides, I'd say, really. Yeah.
Cool.
So while we're waiting, I will start a quick live install of Drupal 9 and Nuxt, just because I find often a lot of people don't quite make the connection of how it works with Drupal until I do it. So yeah, any other questions while that's going?
No, we have like maximum 5 minutes. Because we started also like 5 minutes past. So Wesley, we could start like also 5 minutes past, or so.
All right.
Feel
I'm
free
happy.
to shoot out questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest challenge ahead for the library in terms of features or?
When you say the library, are you talking Drux menu, or are you talking?
More general?
And so, say the question again. Sorry.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge ahead for either the library or the menu initiative in its whole, according to you?
Yeah. So it's Druxt is built on a framework of other modules. So it's probably worth mentioning that. Well, I mentioned you render the Drux menu, which triggers fetch, which uses the Vuex and the utility class and everything. But the actual communication layer for Druxt is currently in the Druxt router module. So Druxt menu does have a requirement on a client, which is Druxt router, and it also has the power of Nuxt behind it, and the plugin system, and access to the Vuex store. It has things like the Webpack management of Nuxt behind it. So as far as using something like Drux menu, it's relatively simple because a lot of those heavy lifting project setup stuff are dealt with. So I think one of the issues that will come up will be that consistent approach of how each of the decoupled things work together. Like menu is just one little thing, and the way that I approach it is that my menu on my page is, that Drux menu customized self-contained component. It's not necessarily a single page app that does all the bits and pieces, although that can be done as well. But as far as the menu initiative goes, I think like there needs to be that common client that Sally is working on, the JS client, something like that. There needs to be, some sort of common state engine, I think, but it's tricky because it depends on how you need to use the code. So you don't need a Vuex store. That's a feature of Drux menu, and it's a feature that allows for, when you have a fully decoupled site and you have that first bootstrap, that first request, it allows for the entire menu to be, pulled in and stored into Vuex, and then just as you navigate around the page to be updated just by watching the route and, filtering the results of the menu all from that store. So yeah, I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but I think just, the framework around the module, I guess, is the trickiest part.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think we're probably about at time. If there's no other questions.
I think this was great. So thank you, Stuart. And And I know that I published in the chat links to the projects, but we will also get it, put it together in an issue on Drupal.org so people do not forget it. And I also posted the YouTube video from Drupal South.
Yep.
If you have any more videos, please share it with us here, and then maybe, people can look at the Drupal part that you wanted to demo to us.
Yeah. Look,
So
I'm more than happy to do more demos, bespoke demos, mostly in my time zone is preferable or closer to my time zone. You can find me on Slack. There's a DruxtJS channel there. I'm always usually around. I also have a Druxt Discord channel, so discord.druxtjs.org, that you can always hit me up for any support related things. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I think now we have somebody who is on the same time zone that I am in Europe. So Wesley, you're gonna be taking over now and telling us about your project. So good luck.
Thank you. So hi, my name is Wesley. I'm a intern at Swiss, and I'm setting things up. So can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Wesley. I'm a fourth-year computer science bachelor at the Hogeschool of Leiden. I've been a PHP user for around 7 years, a Drupal developer for a not a very long time of around 5 months. I really like shiny new things. That's where my experience with Webpack comes from. And I can also be very stubborn, which is the reason why I made what I made. So what have I done? I started working at Swiss, and that was my first interaction with Drupal. My previous thought about Drupal was not very well. I was kind of scared by it. And when I started working with it, it wasn't so bad. I actually like Drupal. And one thing that surprised me back then was the way it handles assets. So I looked at the libraries.yaml file. I looked at how Drupal aggregates assets itself. And I thought, well, we're currently in 2020. There are a lot of libraries like Rollup, Webpack, you name it, that handle that a lot better with tools like Babel and PostCSS and what more. And I was also, looking at the build chain that we use at Swiss internally. And that had some limitations, like you could only use ES5, and it had some very slow builds. So that triggered me to do something with that. So during my internship, I did some research and I made a proof of concept on bringing a certain asset manager and Drupal closer together. So how that started is by talking to a colleague of mine. I think I saw him in a meeting, who helped me make this this Drupal hook, a module hook, which parsed the entire Webpack output, which is quite a big file of around 2.5 megabytes that contain all the build info of your application. What I did is I parsed that, I separated all the chunks, and I looked for references to Drupal modules so that we could have external, so we could have Drupal imports inside of our frontend ES6 modules. That worked quite okay, but it had a lot of limitations and I was not quite happy with it. So I thought, okay, maybe I can bring this to the build instead. So we can do this at build time instead of at runtime. So after that, I started writing a Webpack plugin. I called it aptly the Drupal Webpack plugin. So that was quite interesting actually, because I started looking at Webpack documentation, which is quite big, but very readable. And I ended up finding exactly what I needed. You can tap into everything you need in your build. So what I did is I added a hook into import statements. So the moment you type import Drupal from core/Drupal, you can tap into that and do something with it, transform it or whatever. So I wrote a few hooks, which starts by handling imports, like I said. But when I do that, I create a mapping towards the underlying Drupal module and where the request was made. So later in the build, we can handle the externalization of that module, which you see in handle external. I'll later show a short demo inside my IDE, which can probably make it a bit clearer what I'm exactly talking about. So after the module is externalized, which it knows it can do by looking at the import specifier, which starts with Drupal and then a column. So after all that is done, at the end of your build, we can connect things, which is at the end we do by, again, retrieving that stats JSON and getting the chunks, and then writing into a YAML file, which is the webpack.libraries.yaml file in this case, which works quite well. It does everything you expect it to do. It has aggregation functionality provided by Drupal that works. You can depend on Drupal core, other Drupal libraries, jQuery, paragraphs, you name it. So, and hopefully a good grade for my internship. So now a short demo. I have my PHP Storm here. For this demo, I made a website in Drupal 9. Where did my web browser go? Oh, that's here. Okay, so I made a quick website made with Drupal 9, and it doesn't look the best, but it's just to show the workings of using a module like this. So what you can see here is aggregation turned on. You can see there's only one JavaScript file and everything works. This is the article that renders a view component. And it also support for everything you would expect, like scope styling, asset loading, everything. So how that works. I'm losing my applications. Okay, here we are. So I have a few entry points to find. I chose to define those by adding .entry.js to the end of them. One of the things that opens up is having a discovery tool to automatically get your entry points, which is something I did for the internal proof of concept I made. And this is generally a pretty basic Webpack configuration. Yeah, nothing really weird. Babel loader, CSS support, view support, images and fonts. And here you can see the Drupal Webpack plugin. It takes two options. It takes the path to your libraries file and the name of your team, so it knows how to work with that. And yes, that's the basic Webpack configuration. I made some proof components. Like this global.entry.js runs on every page. You can see here how the importing of Drupal modules works. So you can just type import module from Drupal column and then the Drupal module name. And that will be added to the libraries.yaml file at build time. Here you can see the definition of the view component. And I also have component A and component B for testing multiple entry points. They are called by a controller I made over here, which has just two simple functions. Where the libraries get attached. So that's nothing special, I think. Those can be viewed by going to /component A. And the view component here doesn't show because of sanitation. So you can see everything works. How far am I on time?
You have 20 minutes or like.
Oh, I'm going very quickly.
17 minutes left.
Okay.
But also leave room for Q&A in the end.
Will do. So the global.entry.js file was registered at one place, which is over here in the info.yaml file. Here it just says to always load that library. And the others are just loaded by the components, by the controller. They both have some shared dependencies on modules. One imports a worker, the other imports a huge library, the other does some dynamic importing, just to showcase different capabilities of this approach. And I'm currently into a development build. It's just a simple Webpack min mode development. And I can clear my cache at the same time. Takes a bit. There it is. So when I go back to the website now, and I would go back to the homepage. Aggregation is still turned on. I don't know why that. Oops. Rookie mistake. So again, at CR to clear the cache. Yes, and we should now see. Yeah. Now it has all the files separate, and it still works. So, what more can I show? So, you've now seen the application, and I think it's very cool what I did, because it's a sort of progressive decoupling approach to modernizing your front end and achieving things like also the Decoupled menu initiative, where you could maybe in a more progressive decoupled environment, you could maybe output the menu data on the web page and import it from there using those Drupal imports. I also hope that in the future, if I were to work on this more, I could remove the limitation on importing, because there's currently a limitation that it only works on your entry point file. So that means your component A.entry.js, or your component B or global. But the moment that I import from, say, test component, the view component I made, it wouldn't work because I can't detect the file or chunk it ends up with. So that might be related to the approach I took, writing my Webpack plugin. Or it might be something else, but I haven't been able to figure that out yet. So if there's a Webpack guru who knows that, hit me up. So, and some other things in the future we could do is automatic library reloading. Because at the moment you have to clear your cache, and yeah, the experience is not as well as I would like it to be. And we could also start compiling Drupal libraries ourselves. So you remove the Drupal asset handling entirely and do everything ourselves. That might be something that we should be able to do. And I was reading over in the CK Editor Slack channel about DLLs, and I thought that might be something interesting to look at in the future. And one of the things I also looked at during my research, which I was quite interested in, is building different bundles for different browser targets. You have something like browser list. You can use that to target certain browsers and make different bundles containing different polyfills or other features. And I saw that there's currently a deprecated property on your libraries.yaml file for Internet Explorer at least, but it would be cool if that could be expanded for other browsers as well. So you could sniff the user agent or other capabilities the browser has to serve different bundles. And last but not least, preloading for even faster load times of your website. I think I've been going very fast during this talk, but I think that was it. Thank you very much for listening. You can find my credentials here. GitHub and LinkedIn. No passwords, sorry. And I'll drop a link to the project in the chat. And yeah, thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
So thank you, Wesley. Yeah, they're clapping for you in the chat. So anyone, we have 10 more minutes, and I see Stuart is also still here. So in the case of if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Or if you want to just generally, we also have Theodore and Sally and Liam and Gabe in here. If you have any questions about the Decoupled Menu initiative, feel free to just ask. We're not that many. We're 20 people now. So feel free just to, all questions are welcome.
I have a quick question. How do you trigger the Webpack build? Is it just through a command line? Is something changed on the Drupal side?
So currently it's just a simple npm script. If I remember correctly, I did look at the Webpack project on Drupal.org, which has a drush command built in for building your web application. But I decided against that function, using that module, because it adds some dependency to Node.js on your build environment, and we decided we didn't want that. So yes, it's just an npm script that calls Webpack.
Cool. I have another question if no one else has one. Okay. So if I'm understanding it correctly, it's like it replaces the aggregation and minification that Drupal is doing. Is that a fair characterization?
So maybe not the aggregation entirely. It currently still depends on the Drupal provided aggregation module, but it could be yeah, it's maybe something we can do in the future. I have disabled minification for now because that's not needed, as we already do that on build time. But aggregation is still done by Drupal.
Okay. Thanks. Is this on GitHub somewhere?
Oh yeah, I was supposed to send the link. No, it's on the Bitbucket. One moment. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you get a really good grade.
Yeah. Can we grade you? I see there are some Swiss people in here too. So who do we need to talk to help with the grade?
No, my teachers aren't here from school. I have my presentation next Friday. So.
So there's a question in the chat from Darius. Maybe you can look at that and maybe read the question first, maybe, Wesley.
So Darius asks, Wesley, do you override libraries.yaml upon generation? And yes, for this project, I even added the libraries.yaml file to the git ignore because you don't need it. It gets generated at build time, so you don't need to touch it manually. I hope that answers the question.
Just a bit of a thought provoker or a controversial question, I guess. But progressive versus fully decoupled, like given that there are projects that already manage things like Webpack or whatever the builder is, what would you say to the decision to go progressive versus decoupled? I mean, versus fully.
I think progressive might be better, especially depending. Yeah, well, it mostly depends on the company you're in, of course. For the company I'm currently at, I think progressive might be better because that's a lot easier to implement. Especially with a lot of projects, you can just add small pieces and build that over time to create a better experience, instead of making the full change and having to learn an entire new tech stack for a new website.
Yes, I can see why you would say that. The one thing that I would bring up is you're requiring an understanding of Webpack and how to make Webpack work for Drupal when you have existing open source projects like VitePress and Nuxt and Next and so on, which manage all of the tech stack aspects. So from that point of view, by utilizing an existing framework, there's less that you have to learn how to do.
That's true.
But then again, I'm biased because I've got a stack that will do a lot of that for you already, but not having to implement the project architecture, not having to figure out how to do hot reloading for your modules and all that sort of stuff, not having to worry about cache clearing or anything on Drupal's side is one of the biggest differences that you'll find between fully and progressive.
Yeah, I agree. What can I say? I think for the applications we're making, it's mostly just static pages with just a little touch of a view component, maybe showing a map or something like that. So you wouldn't need an entire decoupled website. So for that easy, just a small touch of interactivity, I think progressive is better. Is that a better answer?
It's a good explanation of your reasoning.
I think there's perhaps also the context of what is the present knowledge of the the people working with it. Yeah, I mean, if you look at there's a lot of developers already used to using Webpack, used to using Vue, only perhaps in the context of Laravel, for example, then a step like this is a way to bring people closer together without adopting a new tech stack alongside what perhaps exposes a few different gaps in knowledge. So I would agree that if we can ignore the current set of users you have, perhaps separating those two and using the power of Drupal as a provider for your decoupled application is perhaps preferred. But sometimes in your road towards that end, you need some steps in between. And yeah, this is a way to create those steps. So perhaps they have a different goal, and yeah, they serve a different goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we have been discussing this in our buffs that we did during DrupalCon is generally about like there are different use cases of when to do this, and you have to keep that in mind. We are sending out a survey, hopefully in this week, where we are actually going to be asking questions like, how are you doing this, and what are you doing today, or how do you wish this to be? So if you are interested in helping out, there is an issue on our Slack channel where you can look through the questions that we have there. We're just trying to make them around decoupled menus at the moment. So please take a look, and in general, just we're going to send that out and hopefully get some answers from the community, and then we hopefully will see the different use cases that the community is using today, and those who are not already using Drupal but want to. So very good input. I think that we are on time, and thank you, Wesley and Stuart, for standing up and doing our first talk in this series that we are doing now. Next week, Miro is going to be talking as well. Miro, maybe you can, if sorry for put you on the spot, but do you want to tell us? Because I see you here, what you're going to be telling us next week?
Yeah, sure. I will be talking more about Drupal part of decoupling. So I will talk about how you can create custom endpoint for JSON API, and how to maybe modify some output of JSON API without creating custom endpoint.
Awesome. And we will also have one more talk. It's going to be all put into the channel, so please join us again next week. Thank you for coming today, and we see you on Slack, or feel free to ping us anywhere in the issue queue. See you next week.